Riddle me this. Why is it, as a person with inattentive type ADHD, am I so bad at multitasking? For example, I just cannot hold a conversation and make a cup of tea at the same time. Like, those are just two things. I do both of them badly if they are happening at the same time. And yet, I somehow, magically, seem to be able to passively follow the repetitive steps of a Zumba class while planning 4 different YouTube videos in my head at the same time. I'm guessing you clicked on this video because you want to know the answer to that question. Is multitasking with ADHD helpful or is it distracting? And I'm going to tell you now, it's both. Like pretty much all of the contradictions of ADHD. In this video, I'm going to explain why some things multitask together well with ADHD and why some things can't. I'm going to share the epiphany that I had with you around how to determine that and ultimately help you to use multitasking to your advantage and avoid the situations where it just is not helpful. First of all, let's just cover some basic definitions so we know what we're working with. If you do a quick Google search of multitasking, this will come up. Multitasking is the performance of more than one task at the same time, or the execution by a computer of more than one program or task simultaneously. But if you look at definitions of multitasking in psychology and related to cognition, it's slightly different. Yes, it's about doing 2 tasks at the same time, but what psychologists actually find is that people don't do 2 things at the same time. They rapidly switch between 2 different tasks. We're told that this is bad for us, right? Like, it drains our attention, it's tiring. If you want to do something well, do one thing at once. And when you have ADHD, we're also prone to distraction. So switching between those different things, it's really hard to keep orientating yourself to the task and going back and forth, even if you think that you're doing 2 things at the same time. So I kind of took this to mean that not only are we kind of bad at multitasking, people just shouldn't be doing it, right? We shouldn't be wearing ourselves out, focus on the one thing at once. But then I noticed something. I play a lot of Tetris on my phone, and I was going through a bit of a dry spell where I hadn't reached my high score for a really long time. Then recently I had a week where I beat my high score 3 times, and I was like, that's weird. What's going on? It's the first time that I'd ever played Tetris while listening to an audiobook at the same time. Weird, right? Because doing both of those things at the same time, arguably multitasking, made me both better at Tetris and also better at listening to the audiobook. By the way, I don't know if anybody, like even neurotypical people, listen to podcasts and audiobooks while doing nothing. Like, I don't understand how one can listen to that while just sitting down, right? Like, normally I'm cleaning or I'm walking or I'm doing something, but in this occasion, I was playing Tetris. So what does that mean for multitasking with ADHD? Because you've got 3 examples there. 1, I can't really make a cup of tea and hold a conversation with somebody at the same time. 2, I can follow a Zumba routine and plan YouTube videos at the same time, but the YouTube video ideas works really well to the detriment of my Zumba routine following. And thirdly, I can listen to an audiobook and play Tetris at the same time, and that multitasking makes me better at both of those things. So what's going on here? When you look at the brain science behind it, it actually makes perfect sense. So I'm going to give you a simple explanation of it here. The main deficit, the main challenge with ADHD is around our executive function, which is part of our prefrontal cortex. So that is the part of our brain that is responsible for our attention, for our motivation, for regulating our behaviour. It's what we use, it's what's activated when we need to pay attention or follow steps or follow instructions. So in the first example, trying to make a cup of tea and hold the conversation at the same time is trying to essentially multitask 2 parts of my prefrontal cortex that are already challenged in some way. The second example of the Zumba example also makes perfect sense, because what is one of the biggest features of ADHD? It's mind wandering. This is what's called the default mode network. It's a network of different areas of our brain that is active during rest and not focused on a particular task. And it's what people with ADHD are really good at. Our default mode network is overactive. We're daydreaming, we're mind wandering, we're thinking of ideas. It's also why I can do all of that while following repetitive Zumba steps, right? It's why my Zumba gets worse, but my ideas get better. So that's using 2 different areas of the brain, which is why it's possible to do those things at the same time, not necessarily to the benefit of the cognitive task, as many of us with ADHD know. So what about the third example? What about the fact that listening to an audiobook and playing Tetris at the same time seems to make me better at doing both? They both require cognitive skills. You have to pay attention, you have to listen, you have to make quick decisions as you're looking at those Tetris cubes coming down. Like, it requires you to be all in and to be focused. So why is that not a problem when making a cup of tea and having a conversation is a problem? Pairing together Tetris and an audiobook helps you be more present with both of those activities. I'm surprisingly good at Tetris for the amount of other things that I think about when I'm playing it. I can't really make it through a few minutes of an audiobook without my mind completely wandering. One of the ways in which you deactivate your default mode network is by shifting your attention to something external. But that's a challenge, right? Like, that's part of the struggle with ADHD. One of the ways in which we effectively turn off our default mode network is by bringing our attention to something externally. So, the reason why it's effective to pair that Tetris task with the audiobook is because they are stopping your default mode network, stopping your mind from wandering while you're working on one of those things. So, here's my tip: notice the things that you really struggle to do at the same time. Give yourself permission to not do them at the same time. Whenever I have people around at my house and I need to cook something or make something, I will always do it in advance. And if I need to finish something off while they are there, I will just say, "Can you give me 5 minutes? I just need to do this before we have a conversation," because I just get stressed trying to do both at the same time. Also, don't be afraid to pair things together that help you to be more present and to pay more attention to both, to stop that mind from wandering. Because when you get caught up in thinking that, like, you shouldn't multitask, it's bad for your attention, you kind of stop using the things that actually they would be good for you if you understood why they were good for you. It's also why, if you're doing kind of basic, boring admin tasks, those kind of cognitive tasks that don't require a lot of thinking, it can be even beneficial to listen or watch something at the same time that you've already watched before, that you know really well, that you don't need to pay a lot of attention to, but pairing it with that low demand cognitive task can help you stay present, because hearing the words of something going on in the background stops your mind from wandering elsewhere completely. Share your tips in the comments for what kind of tasks you find pairing together works really well. I would love to find some more interesting ways to pay attention to the stuff that I need to do sometimes, and I'm sure other people in the community would, so let us know in the comments. I'm actually just laughing at the thought that I think that I'm passively following Zumba steps, but that my mind has wandered so far that I don't actually know what I'm doing. And everybody else has noticed and I haven't.